Township of Howell Planning Board meeting Thursday, January 20th, 2022. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 7th, 2022, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on January 7th, 2022, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 7th, 2022, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the Bulletin Board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Members of the public will have a chance to ask questions and comment on an application once the chairman opens the hearing up to members of the public. If you wish to ask questions or comment on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature and we will bring you into the meeting one at a time. You will need to have audio and video capability. You will be sworn in and you will need to provide your name and address. For anyone calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. This meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai?
Here.
Mr. Cristiano?
Here.
Mr. Dorado?
Here.
Mr. Husser?
Here.
Mr. Greenfield?
Your audio is down.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Nicastro?
Here.
Councilwoman O'Donnell?
Here.
Mr. Seaman?
Here.
Mr. Paramonte? I do not see him. And Chairman Tannenhouse?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for our first responders and those both serving here and abroad. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. Eileen, do we have approval of minutes?
We have no minutes this evening.
Vouchers?
I have no vouchers this evening.
Any correspondence?
I don't actually have correspondence, but Mr. Alfieri is here. He wanted to address the board on one of the applications on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
I just brought him into the hearing.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Salvatore Alfieri. The ecosystem matter, which is on tonight, we're not prepared to proceed. The engineer is working on plan revisions to address comments that were raised by the board professionals and also the board members at the last public hearing. We're requesting that it be carried to a date that I forget, Eileen, what was it, February?
February 17th.
February 17th, yes. So we're requesting that the board carry it without further notice. And of course, I will grant whatever extension the board requires, and I would follow that up with the letter.
Great, thank you.
Eileen, is that going to be a virtual meeting, much like tonight?
It is going to be a Zoom meeting, just like tonight.
All right, Chairman, would you like to make the official announcement?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. Members of the public, the case that was scheduled for a continued hearing this evening, SP-1093 Ecosystems LLC, involving minor site plan with bulk variance relief, involving the property. I can't see the address. So anyway, it's along Route 33. The applicant has asked that that be carried to the board's regularly scheduled meeting for February 17th, 2022 at 7 p.m. It's going to be a virtual meeting. So if you're here for Ecosystems LLC, it's being carried on notice, which means there'll be no further mailed notice, no further published notice. Again, the hearing will resume on February 17th, 2022, 7 p.m. remotely like tonight. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Sal.
I have no other correspondence.
Okay, thanks, Eileen. Resolutions, amendment to the conservation element of the master plan, eligible voters, Mr. Bavai, Mr. Husser, Mr. Castro, Mr. Cristiano, and myself. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
A resolution for planning board attorney, eligible voters, Mr. Bavai, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Gerardo, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Husser, Councilwoman O'Donnell, Mr. Seaman, and myself. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Councilwoman O'Donnell,
yes,
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
On behalf of the firm, I want to thank the board for the continued confidence we have in us.
No problem. Resolution for planning board engineer, eligible voters, Mr. Bavai, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Husser, Councilwoman O'Donnell, Mr. Seaman, and myself. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Memorialized.
Thank you. Second? Thank you, Mr. Cristiano. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Councilwoman O'Donnell,
yes,
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
Okay, resolution for planning board planner, eligible voters, Mr. Bavai, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Husser, Councilwoman O'Donnell, Mr. Seaman, and myself. Do I have a motion?
motion to memorialize the planner,
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second,
Roll call?
Mr. Bavai,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Councilwoman O'Donnell,
yes,
Mr. Seaman,
yes,
Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
On behalf
Okay.
of Jen, thank you.
You're welcome. We have a resolution for planning board licensed tree expert, eligible voters, Mr. Bavai, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Husser, Councilwoman O'Donnell, Mr. Seaman, and myself. Do I have a motion, please?
so moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
Second.
Thank you.
Mr. Bavai,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Councilwoman O'Donnell,
yes,
Mr. Seaman,
Yes,
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
The resolution for case number SP-1092, Dime 9 LLC. Eligible voters are Mr. Bavai, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Hustler, Mr. Castro, and Mr. Seaman. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Bavai,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
and Mr. Seaman.
yes,
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
Okay, we have a resolution for case number SP-1091. Eligible voters are Mr. Bavai, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Husser, Mr. Nacastro, Mr. Seaman, and myself. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call?
Mr. Bavai,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
yes,
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized. Thank you.
Okay, any submission waivers?
No submission waivers this evening.
All right, and we'll get to the cases. Case number SP-1037, Pioneer at Howell LLC. Eligible voters are Mr. Provide, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Husser, Mr. Seaman, Mr. Cristiano, and myself. Has anybody else certified that they're eligible to vote?
Brian, I'm recusing myself.
Okay?
Have a good
Mr.
Okay,
Mr.
before you jump
Greenfield,
off, hold on for a second, Rob. Go ahead, Eileen.
Mr. Greenfield and Councilwoman O'Donnell have certified that they're eligible to vote on that.
Okay, so since Mr. Nacastra is going to be recusing himself, and we probably won't see him for the rest of the meeting, anything for master plan update?
Paul will give an update.
Okay,
So we're good.
And
All
don't
right,
forget, we have a special meeting on Monday, the 31st.
yeah, and there
Yes.
are several people that need to get caught up to make sure we have a proper quorum, so please do the homework. And Steve, we don't have any need to go into executive session.
For, I don't know of any reason to go into executive session
Okay.
unless some matter that the board needs to discuss of confidential matter.
No, I don't, but we're okay. Mr.
All right, very good.
Nacastra, have a good night.
Mr.
Good night.
Chairman,
Bye, Rob.
Good night, Rob.
just before Mr. Nacastro leaves, I just wanted to thank the board for our appointment. I know I was unable to attend the reorganization meeting, and Jordan Rizzo was there in my place. And you went so quickly through the resolutions, I didn't have the opportunity to just thank the board, so I wanted to do that. So thank you very much for your continued confidence.
You're welcome.
Good night. Keep up the good work.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Counselor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Tonight, we are here seeking preliminary and final major site plan. This was a carry from a meeting back in November because it's been so long. We're going to have several individuals provide some testimony. The first individual I'm going to call up is Mark Lieber. He's going to go over many of the changes that we've done since the last meeting. And we took a lot of the board's comments and concerns, and I believe we've addressed many of those. And then I'm going to have three other individuals: traffic, architecture, and planning. But without further ado, I would like to call Mr. Lieber up.
Before we start, Mr. Alfieri, do you want to tell me who the others are, and I'll just bring them into the hearing so they're in here?
Sure. One is Barbara Ellen, Joe Fishinger,
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Ludwig.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Dante, was Mr. Lieber sworn at the November hearing?
He was not. He wasn't at
I
the
don't believe
November
so.
hearing.
No.
Okay, so Mr. Lieber, I'd like to swear you. Please raise your right hand, sir. Mr. Lieber, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Could you give us your full name and business address for the record, please?
Yep, Mark with a C. My last name is Lieber, Leber. The company is East Point Engineering at 11 South Main Street in Marlboro.
Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Lieber, can you please provide your qualifications for the board?
Yes, good evening. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Drexel University. Following graduation, I continued on to complete an MBA program with Rutgers Graduate School. I was licensed in 2004 as an engineer in New Jersey. In 2005, I received a planner's license. In 2006, I was certified as a municipal engineer. And in 2007, I joined the Howell Township Planning Board, believe it or not. I actually have moved out of Howell since then, but I have continued to be active in this field and testify in numerous boards throughout Middlesex and Monmouth County, mostly on applications similar to this, as well as subdivision applications.
Thank you. We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Lieber, can you please just give a basic background as it relates to the application itself, and then get into what changed from the prior meeting?
Yes. There's a little bit of history with the application. It did start out a couple years ago as a strip center facing Route 33. Then it was modified to a two-story office building. Later on, the applicant acquired additional properties on Colts Neck Road, which are all in the same zone. And then we had revised the plan to incorporate those lots. Now, at the November 4th meeting, I know there were some comments as to, the most recent design, and I'm going to go through what had changed since then. I'm going to start with Exhibit A20, which is the site plan sheet that was last revised in December, on December 3rd. Let me see if I can put that up. All right, so this is the latest plan. And I'm going to go through the main changes that are, most important to the application. The first was facing Route 33. There was a row of 13 parking stalls. And there were comments that, they're right against the right-of-way line. There's no room for any landscape buffer. Now, because we had been in excess on the parking requirements, we just deleted those 13 parking stalls. And on the landscape plan, we provided landscaping in that area. There was some confusion at the last meeting about where are all the various doors in and out of this building. So we updated this to be consistent with the architect's plan. So you'll see each triangle represents an egress door from the building. If there's two triangles, it's a double door. There was a comment about the pylon sign. We moved that sign so it's 20 feet from both right-of-way lines. Along the Colts Neck Road frontage, Monmouth County had asked for an easement, so we dimensioned the sign to be 20 feet off the easement to comply with the ordinance. Now, we had gotten some feedback on the building mounted signage, how much signage each tenant would need. And we ran some calculations just to demonstrate compliance with the code. We figured it's a 6-tenant building and each sign would be about 20 square feet, which yields 120 square feet total on the front facade. That works out to only be 6.5% of the facade area where 25% is allowed. Now, there's no signage proposed on the back of the building or the left wall of the building. But on the right wall, which faces Route 33, we're proposing an 80 square foot sign, but that facade area is 900 square feet. So the sign is only 8.9% of the facade and 25% is allowed. So I think we are in conformance with the signage. As far as pedestrian access, we added these additional handicap ramps in the parking lot to get access to the sidewalk. And we also connected the sidewalk on Colts Neck Road into the parking lot through the addition of this crosswalk and this piece of sidewalk here. On the landscaping plan, which is sheet 5, we added plantings along the building in order to comply with section 106G of the code. And we also added street trees and we increased the size of the street trees so that the spacing requirements and the planting size complied with chapter 188-122. Now, we still do not show on this plan sidewalk along Route 33. And it's not because we're opposed to doing it, it's because we're still waiting for comments from the NJDOT as to our permit application for this entrance. So we could talk about the sidewalk a little later in the meeting when we go through the review letters. Other than that, we clarified on the plan where the 6-foot high fence is going to be. So it's going to start at the end of this parking stall, continue around the perimeter of the property. And then it ends at the front of the property on Colts Neck Road. That's all going to be 6-foot high fence. And lastly, we added more landscaping and buffering, more or less mimicking the landscape buffer plan that was proposed across the highway. We selected similar plantings and the arrangement was similar, not so much for consistency, but because I understand that that plan was, very well received. So we had sort of mimicked what they had done on our new landscape plan. And that really summarizes all our changes, as shown on the screen.
Thank you, Mark. So why don't we get into the review letter? So I have two review letters. One is from CME dated December 8th, 2021.
Yes.
So before we get into that, if you could just identify the actual variance relief we are seeking today.
Okay, so I guess we'll start on page 3, where it gets into section 18810 signs. So it indicates here, that we should identify the signs that are proposed and where they are on the building, the building facade. So we do have with us the building facade plans, which I'm going to tell you is exhibit A16. Let me just switch. Okay, so what you see here is the front elevation facing Colts Neck Road. These rectangles are the 20 square foot signs. They're about 2 by 10 each. But we wanted to add on the right side elevation, the sign I spoke about before, which was a 4 by 20, and that would face Route 33.
What do you anticipate that sign saying?
We're proposing like a medical use here, so it would be the name of the medical use.
And is that going to be their entrance, that side of the building?
No, the only doors for the public are facing Colts Neck Road on this top elevation here. So other than that, the only other sign that's proposed is the freestanding sign, which is situated at the corner of the, the intersection. Let me see here.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I have a question. The signage facing Route 33, that would also incorporate the physical address of that building?
Yeah, we can add the address to the sign.
I mean, people are coming down, Route 33. They may not be aware that that's the building they're looking for on Colts Neck Road. Okay.
All right, let me make a note. Hold on. Okay, I just added that.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item is B 18812 about fences. Now, let me just go back to the other plan here. So again, we have that fence that's partly along the perimeter of the property. It is 6 feet high. However, it's not 50% open. We were proposing a board-on-board fence. And the reason that we prefer a solid fence is because although the lot's in a commercial zone, the land behind it and the land to the left of it is a residential use. So we felt it was better to have a solid fence. And our fence is not anywhere in the front yard on Route 33, but it does project beyond the front yard on Colts Neck Road only because we wanted to provide that solid fence to our neighbor here, which is a house. So technically we would need relief because we have more than 4 foot high in that side yard adjacent to the dwelling.
Could you please provide, just show on the plan how far towards Colts Neck Road the fence will come to on the?
Yeah, let me just zoom in. I know it's hard to see, but these little squares that are right on the property line, that's the fence. So it's really coming to really be even with this parking curb line here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so letter C talks about placing structures, disturbance, or materials or parking areas in a buffer. So I want to switch to a different exhibit that I submitted for this, which is A22, which really shows the constraints on the property with regard to what the zone allows for construction, taking into account setbacks and buffers. So there are three things shown on this exhibit I'm going to explain. The diagonal lines that are along the top and left side of this plan, that's the 50-foot wide perimeter buffer, which is outlined in chapter 188-63A. And that buffer is required along a residential zone limit. And the property behind us and to the left are in a residential zone. Now, the heavy dashed line that you see in the center of the print, those are the building setback lines as per the zone district. So you have two front yards because it's a corner lot, and then we have a rear yard and our side yard. Now, in the ordinance, section 188-78-2K2, it states that in this zone, you have to have a 50-foot wide parking setback. So that area that's constrained is the part of the property along the frontages that are little squares. So when you consider that it's a corner lot on a state highway and you apply all of these 50-foot buffers, you would have to fit the entire development of this property, including your parking lot, within the areas that don't have the diagonal lines or these squares. So that poses a very serious constraint on the usability of the property. So in essence, we are asking for relief from that 188-63D because we are parking vehicles in the 50-foot wide parking setback. Our parking lot extends toward both street frontages. And there was a comment that, the underground utilities associated with our stormwater management system are technically in this 50-foot wide perimeter buffer, but although they're underground, they're still within that buffer. So that would need relief as well. And the reason that we have piping back there is because should this stormwater management basin fill up, the downstream discharge is a connection to this drain that is located like a few feet off our rear property line. So we needed to run a pipe to get to that drain. Now, moving on to D, it also speaks about the buffer between a residential and commercial development. And you have to have two of the prongs of the requirements met. One is landscaping, fencing, or walls at least 10 feet high. Or you can have a landscape berm 6 feet high. Or three, a building setback measured from the buffer line of at least 200 feet. Or number four is a parking setback of at least 100 feet. So we can't meet two of the items because we don't have a fence or a wall 10 feet high, and we don't have a landscape berm 6 feet high. We can't have a building setback 200 feet off the rear property line because that would leave no buildable area for a structure. And then we don't have a parking setback 100 feet off the line because you could see that there's parking in the rear of the property within that area. And it's only 131 feet from our building corner to the right of way, which really means that you'd have to add another 50 feet to the 50-foot buffer to get a 100-foot parking setback, which really poses a serious constraint for laying out the project. So in essence, we would need relief from that section. Letter E is also similarly about off-street parking. Section 188-78.2K2 says you can't have off-street parking within 50 feet of any tract boundary. And again, we do have parking within 50 feet of a boundary along both frontages and in the rear over here. So I think that takes us through the variances, so we can talk about the waivers. We had a lighting plan where the code states a maximum of a half a foot candle is permitted. We had 1.28 foot candles proposed. I mean, I personally feel that more lighting is safer. A half a foot candle is a really low illumination level. And I would request to keep the 1.28 foot candle. But, you know, if the board wanted dimmer lighting, then, you know, we would have to revise the lighting plan to have dimmer lighting. So we're asking for the waiver. Item B, section 188-106A is regarding driveway widths. So the driveway from Route 33 cannot comply with the maximum 24-foot width because in order to meet DOT requirements, we have to have a channelizing island in the center, which makes the driveway opening about 35 feet. So we need a waiver for that. And this is a situation that the DOT has jurisdiction on. And if we delete this island, we wouldn't be able to have, you know, access from 33. Now, item C, section 188-106 F1A, I believe was addressed at the last meeting. Prior to redesigning anything on this property, I went and met with the fire official to talk to him about laying out the fire lanes. And at the time, I just showed him a schematic building footprint and where we thought we would have our access. And he wrote a letter before the last hearing that he was in acceptance of the 30-foot wide main aisle across the property along Colts Neck Road staying 30 feet, but the two ancillary aisles, which are on the Route 33 side, being 25 feet. So technically we need a waiver, but I did, you know, meet with him and I believe he did write a letter saying that he was okay with that. Item D is regarding the loading zone. We have one area on the property for loading and unloading, and it's situated in the front of the building. Now, we didn't feel that a loading zone was really required for this use. It's a medical office. There is a small cafe in the building. However, the types of deliveries that come in, usually like Amazon-sized trucks and UPS. So I thought about this, and rather than just have them park in the aisle in the parking lot to make the delivery, I cut in a notch here against the front of the building where there's a large plaza. And, you know, a UPS truck could park there for a few minutes, bring in a package, and then they could leave without being in a drive aisle. But there's no need for a tractor trailer loading zone or, you know, anything of that like. So because this loading zone's in the front yard, it technically needs a waiver. So we're requesting that relief. Item E, again, is about parking space in the 50-foot buffer we talked about. Item F, it states that off-street parking shall be 19 feet in length where 18 foot is proposed. We found that the standard for a off-street parking space is really 9 by 18. That's a very common size, and that's throughout many municipalities. It does help us with the layout by having 9 by 18, so we are asking for a waiver from 9 by 19. The item G, we're not asking for a waiver. The applicant agrees to the tree replacement fee. Item H.
Sorry, Mark, I don't want to
Yeah.
cut you off, but no, you need a waiver because you need to make a contribution. So. while
I'm
you're
sorry, I
agreeable-
misread that.
Okay,
Okay, so that's correct. We need relief from that. So that's regarding the tree replacement. H, okay, so the sidewalk.
What does Mark, if we get off the tree, Laura, what does that mean? He needs a waiver. Does that mean he's not contributing to the tree fund?
No, Mr. Chairman, the way our ordinance is written is if they cannot plant all of the required trees on site, and Carrie can elaborate, but if they can't plant all the required trees on the site, they're required to seek a waiver from the board to actually make the contribution. So they are agreeable to make the contribution, but I think what they have to indicate is how they don't meet the plantable area or they can't provide the necessary plantings on site.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, just a couple more. Item H is regarding sidewalk. Now, we did add sidewalk along Colts Neck Road, and then we tied that sidewalk into our site through this piece here. I really just wanted to ask the board straight out, do they want sidewalk on Route 33 or would they prefer a contribution for sidewalk?
So our ordinance doesn't allow for contributions for sidewalk anymore. So I think the direction would be from the board as to whether or not they want sidewalk along Route 33 or want to request it. I would note, I believe the project across the street did provide the required sidewalk. But again, I would defer to the board as to whether or not you want sidewalk in this area. But our ordinance has been amended and no longer has the contribution aspect.
Okay,
Laura, I think that was amended again, and I think there's another one that they do have to contribute.
Oh my goodness, right? I'll try
You know
to-
what? I'll send it to you if I can find it, and then you can check it out.
Great, thanks, Eileen.
I'll let the rest of the board, weigh in, but I think putting the sidewalk in could be a benefit in the future for this corner, and tying in eventually into a sidewalk that may run in front of the adjoining retail center and possibly into Equestria.
Yeah, I agree, Brian. It seems
Yeah.
like it's a very, hot development area, and it just seems with the more development, they're just gonna keep going, connecting. So I'm in agreement.
okay, I don't want to dwell on it. We'll add that to the plan then, the sidewalk on Route 33.
Thank you.
While we're talking about sidewalks, was there any thought about doing an interior sidewalk contiguous to the neighboring development, Equestra?
You're talking about through the neighborhood, the affordable housing portion that's behind the
No, I'm
retail
talking
center?
about, instead of coming out to 33,
Mhm.
you know how often we have businesses and they have walkways to the community. So the community doesn't have to deal with a major highway or stepping into a traffic area. It's a walkthrough specifically for the adjoining neighborhood, which would be Equestra in this case. I mean, could a sidewalk go to that strip mall? I'm not familiar with the amount of space between your project, I am aware of the area, but I don't know the actual footage to the strip mall that is basically behind you on 33.
Yeah,
So I
and-
wonder, is there an advantage to connecting the two, which we've often done in other settings, from communities and stores?
So I can get our sidewalk up to this point right here. Because the DOT wants us to move the curb line, I think 2 feet into our property. Once I get
Okay.
past this point, if I continue the sidewalk, this is the shopping center parking lot, by the way, where Dunkin' Donuts
Okay.
is.
Okay,
If I were to continue past this point, the sidewalk would be on their property. I obviously without permission, we can't do that, but I can get it up to this point, no problem.
so then in essence, then that person that came from the professional office would be cutting across lawn or whatever to get to Dunkin' Donuts, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, if they wanted to walk, they would probably take the sidewalk to the end and walk down the grass over here.
I get, that's the part that I'm asking about, an actual, or running a sidewalk and back. I will yield to the professionals because I'm sure they're aware of, the process that I'm thinking of that we've done in the past. But if it's an impossibility or doesn't make sense, then of course not. But I would yield to the professionals for that thought.
So my only comment would just be without consent, it would be hard, but I think, Mark can certainly look at what he can do at least to the property line to the commercial center. And maybe we can work together with that owner to get something which adjoins the curb line. I mean, it's going to be hard to get the sidewalk in there as that is, but we can work with Mr. Lieber. But again, sort of as he indicated, without consent of an adjoiner, we wouldn't be able to just install sidewalk.
All right, well, it's actually getting to the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, correct?
It'll be
Close.
close.
Okay, good enough. Just a thought. I know we've done similar things in the past. Not everything can be done. So thank you.
All right, let me just make a note here. Okay, so item I is about the location of the parking lot, that it's not more than 50 feet from any side or rear property line that abuts a residential use. And we are in this 50-foot buffer, which is the diagonal lines. So, we have a planner here tonight to talk more about that, but I do want to share something here, which was submitted as Exhibit A18. It's an aerial photo. Just going to zoom in here. The part of the property that's in question is this corner here. So the buffer of the 50 feet is already adjacent to the Equestra buffer, which goes around here. And the nearest residence is this unit at the bottom. And then this is all commercial use, even though it's in a residential zone. So we're asking for a waiver to keep our parking layout the way it is.
Mark, did you ever measure what the distance is from the back of the proposed building to the existing residence?
I don't have the exact distance. I can get it to you if you give me a second.
Sure, take your time.
Give me one sec. Okay. All right, let me see. I forgot which exhibit you're looking at. You still looking at the aerial?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, let me switch to this. That's just a site plan. Okay, from this front property line to the nearest residence on that cul-de-sac is 260 feet. And the building, this back corner is 146 feet in. So if I deduct that, I get 113 feet from this back corner to the nearest residence.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we are asking for relief, generally for this portion of the parking lot within that 50-foot buffer. I mean, even though the residence is all the way over here, there's no parking over there. So this is really adjacent to the commercial shopping center.
Just out of curiosity, the amount of parking that you took away that was fronting Route 33, does that equal the parking that's in that buffer?
No, well, there were 13 spaces we deleted. So you have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I guess 13, yeah. Coincidence. Okay. Interesting.
So technically, you could put it back on Route 33 and come out of the buffer, which is probably not ideal because we were concerned about traffic being that close, parking that close to the edge of Route 33.
I mean, me personally, like I prefer this landscaping that we proposed rather than the parking. This is Exhibit A21. So this is the vicinity that we took out those spaces. So we literally filled it in with, you know, shade trees, ornamental trees, and a line of shrubs, you know, to make it pretty attractive. And then in the back of the building, this is the buffer where we more or less mimicked what was across the street.
And there's fencing too along that area, right?
Yeah, this is where you have that 6-foot high fence coming along the back and then down the side.
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate it.
so we have item J, which is we had to surround the parking with a 3-foot high visual screen. And what I did there is I added the shrubs, you know, along the roadway frontage, including, you know, this corner along Colts Neck Road on the left. I wasn't sure if the 3-foot high hedge was supposed to go around all of the parking stalls.
Yes,
No.
it has to be on both frontages.
Okay, so I can fill in, you know, along this gap on Colts Neck Road and then along this gap on Route 33 so that we wouldn't need that waiver.
Sherry, is that acceptable?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Thank you.
All right, now the next one is that a 5-foot wide strip should be provided along Colts Neck Road for landscaping. Now, there's an area, let me zoom in. Right here where these 5 parking stalls are, that does not have 5 feet from the dark line, which is the property line, to the curb. I did provide plantings here and landscaping, and it is about 20 feet to the street line. But we need a waiver because we don't have the 5 feet in that area.
But also this gap right here.
Here,
too. So if you're going to provide the full parking lot buffer, it would also take care, for the most part, of the 5-foot strip going around the property there.
okay, yeah, this is the area I'm going to fill in. But it was just the way it was worded. It said it was measured from the right of way, so I couldn't get 5 feet. I got the plants, but I didn't get the 5 feet. So, I mean, I think we need a waiver for it, but, you know, if not, then, you know, I'll take that off the list.
Ms. Spiro, do you want to clarify, please? You got that look.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. He doesn't have that 5 feet, but I mean, it's close. And like you said, he has the plantings, but really, I'd like the plantings to continue. So it's a continuous buffer.
And I will. I'll make them continue.
Thank you.
All right, the next one's an architectural question, which I'm going to have the architect discuss. That's about the roof line. And then item M is also another architectural question that's regarding the facade because it's 155 feet wide. There's a requirement about projections or recesses across 10% of the facade, so he's going to discuss that. I think I got through all.
You did. Yeah, I think I touched on all of the waivers and variances. And then there were some comments in Laura's report as well. So she was asking for overall operations of the site with the particular tenants. At this time, we don't have any set tenants, correct?
No.
And we're proposing like a general medical and a cafe.
That's right.
And then the hours of operation would be akin to what those traditional businesses would operate as.
Yes.
Is that the end of the testimony, Mr. Alfieri?
Well, there's a few more items in the
Few
letter.
more comments we need to address. You want to touch on the stormwater?
Yeah, I'm just looking through, like, we'll definitely have no issue with the lot consolidation. We'll provide the detail for the pylon sign. We talked about the wall signs. I'll send over the circulation plans for the various trucks and vehicles for, to examine the turning radii. Item F on page 6 is about landscaping. G is stormwater, which I'm going to get back to in 1 second. H, I don't think we're going to have any noise, glare, pollutants, or flammable hazardous materials or solid liquid waste, other than what's normally disposed of. If it is a medical use, they would have the required containers for disposal of medical waste. That would be provided. And then this last item here was about frontage improvements and whatnot, which we already talked about. The various agencies that are listed there, we obviously will have to secure approval letters from them or letters of no interest. And then I can make the technical review really easy, referring to the comments dated December 7th, 2021. I looked through every comment, and we have no objection to those comments. Getting back to your question on the stormwater, I am going to switch to a different sheet, which is the grading and utility plan of the set that was previously submitted. Here we go. So this project has a split stormwater system. Because water that comes down on the roof of a building is considered clean, it doesn't have to be filtered for any sort of particulates. So we've been able to take all of that roof water directly into this row of chambers, which is underneath the parking lot. The chambers would fill up with the water, and if they reach a certain elevation, the water will be released through a flow control structure, which will let the water through a pipe that goes along Route 33, parallel to Route 33, and then back across the rear of the building to tie into that catch basin that's located on the neighbor's property. Now, for the parking areas, because they're used by motor vehicles and the rules require that water be settled to remove anything suspended in the water before discharging it, that's going to come into this detention area on the side of the building where the water will settle and part of it will percolate into the soils, but larger storms would go through a flow control device, which will also let the water out into that existing drainage system in the rear of the property. And if you look at the calculations, in summary, how this works is all of the water on this property is already draining to the back into these two catch basins. There's one near Route 33 and there's one at the back of our property. So after we develop the site, there'll be an increase in runoff, but we're able to hold back that increase and let it out very slowly so that those flow rates are much reduced from the existing condition. And that's in compliance with what the state has in place for stormwater management.
Thank you. Ms. Newman, it was your comment. Do you have any further testimony to help the board understand what Mark is talking about?
No, Mark went through it very technically. We were just looking to ensure that it complied with all state regulations as well as the municipal ordinance as it related to water quality, quantity, and recharge.
And it meets
Yes.
okay, thank you.
And I'll still be on for questions if they come up.
And Mark, are there any comments in in Jen Beam's letter that you would like to discuss?
I don't think so, because a lot of her comments were focused on the variances and the waivers.
Okay.
So I
think,
honestly think,
Mark,
Yeah.
you addressed most of our comments. You know, obviously, we would like to hear your planner's testimony on how the requested variances and waivers meet, you know, the statutory criteria. But I think you addressed what they are, or should have been similar to Laura's.
Mark, can I jump in there? Can you go over more regarding the residential buffer? I know you had stated that you couldn't meet, you know, 2 of the 4 requirements, and you mentioned item F, but then you went right by it.
item F, hold on. Is it item F in the December 8th letter?
Yeah, page 6.
Oh, page 6.
It was right before the stormwater.
Yes, okay. So let me go back to the
Yeah,
landscape
the
plan.
landscaping, I had made a comment on this also, I think in the technical too. The landscaping that you have there at the back of the site, there's none of them are evergreens. I mean, it's not a big deal. I just would like you to agree that you would, you know, work with us and provide something that's gonna, you know, put a 4-season buffer in.
Okay, so let me just check one thing here. MV
It's
Magnolia.
a magnolia.
Yeah, what if we switch out all the magnolias for evergreens?
Well, it kind of depends what kind of evergreens you're gonna put in.
Well, Sherry, we have no problem with working with you to find a solution.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we could work on that. I mean, quantity wise, it should be fine. But yeah, let's not just do just a complete switch over from one to the other.
All right, let me just make a note here. All righty. I think that's all I have for you. I know we got a Shade Tree Commission letter, but it just had a check off that there were no comments at this time.
Hey, I have 2 questions. The existing fence that's along the resident to the planned left side of the site,
Yeah,
they already have an existing fence there, from my understanding. Are you using that fence, or are you putting your own fence on your side of the property? So there'll actually be 2 fences along that property line.
yes, there will be. That fence on the left side, it's, I guess, post and rail. And then it changes to, I think, a stockade fence. And I don't know. They might have removed the post and rail. I'm trying to look for a recent picture. But
If you're putting your own fence in, then I'm satisfied with my comment.
oh, okay. All I want you to know is that after we started this design, they went and installed a new fence after this was surveyed. So, but
Okay.
we'll have our own fence.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you're maintaining your own fence. And then the last question I have for you is I don't see any bollards on all of the head-on parking. And we definitely need bollards per our ordinance in front of the building. And I wanted to ask my professionals if they thought the bollards would be needed in front of the storm basin as well.
Sorry, I was having an issue muting. Obviously, the ordinance requires that they provide some barrier between the parking where it directly above sidewalk to the building. So we would recommend that they comply with that standard and or work it into the architecture of the building. So they should indicate how they intend to comply. Mark, as it relates to the basin, what is the depth of the basin?
It is about 4 feet. And I was going to propose, I guess, a timber guide rail across the front because it looks nicer.
That would be fine.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that that be done.
We have no
Will
objection.
it be the standard timber guide rail
agree.
with the metal posts
Yeah.
and the timber front?
Yeah,
And that's for in front of the basin.
right.
Okay. And some other bollard protection or architectural protection of the building for the spots in front of the building.
Yeah, do you know, Laura, what diameter bollards required?
No, I don't think we specify a certain diameter, but it has to withstand a vehicle.
Okay,
So it'd have to be, we can't put like a 4-inch bollard. That won't work.
okay. All right,
Any further questions, Chairman?
I do not. Does anybody else on the board have any questions?
I have one question.
Go ahead, Mr. Christian.
The water catch coming off the roof. I'm just curious as to why it would come off the front of the building, down, run parallel to Route 33, across to the back and over into the catch. Why not just come to the back of the building? I'm just curious about that.
so the answer to that is originally when we designed the project, the building was much larger. And we didn't have room to do what you just said by putting that underground in the back. So what happened is when we reduced the size of the building to make room over there to do that, we then went and added all that landscaping. So because you can't have the landscaping above those chambers, we literally left it the way it was.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to call our next witness. Thanks, Mark. We're going to have our architect come up and provide some testimony just to kind of orient the board to what the proposed site will look like. Kurt Ludwig, are you available?
I'm here.
All right.
Mr. Ludwig, I'd like to swear you in. Can you put your camera on if you have that capability?
I thought it was on. Let's see.
I want to see your face.
There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Ludwig. Please, we're going to swear you in. Please raise your right hand. Mr. Ludwig, do you swear from the testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Okay, Kurt Ludwig, is that your full name?
Kurt Joseph Ludwig,
Okay, and what is your business address, sir?
77 North Main Street, Milltown, New Jersey, 08850.
Thank you very much, sir.
Sure, you're welcome.
Mr. Ludwig, can you please provide your qualifications for the board?
From Arizona State University in 1987. I became a licensed architect in New Jersey in 1991, and I opened up my practice at its current location then. I provided numerous testimony meetings throughout the state, many in Monmouth County.
All with septic credentials.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Kurt, if you could just describe the proposed architecture, and then once you're completed, I'm going to ask you to address those two comments in Laura's report.
Sure. If I may, if Mark could go back to sheet A2. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so the project consists of a one-story building. It's designed on a slab construction. The proposal is to split the building up into 6 separate tenant spaces. Each tenant space will include a front door facing the parking lot and then a rear door. Also, each tenant space will include a utility room and bathrooms along the back of the building. And all those details will comply with the barrier-free code. This plan indicates the floor plan where you can see the 6 tenant spaces and the building footprint.
Thank you. Ms. Newman, do we have any facade architectural questions?
Yes, we do. So per the ordinance, roof line offsets are required and they should not exceed 75 feet in length. So that is among the relief being sought. And also the wall projections.
Is that relief required along the rear and the one plan left side, I guess?
That is correct.
Is it your opinion that we'll even see those facades with all of the landscaping? Or is that a Sherry question?
I think we should probably, I mean, ultimately look, this is a design waiver relief. And I think we should hear, I mean, it's the testimony that they should be providing, which demonstrates why they can't comply.
Okay, let's hear the
so-
testimony, then I'll give my 2 cents.
Thank you, Chairman. Kurt, if you could address those two comments, and those are actually the two waivers that I was going to have you address in Laura's report. So
Could you-
let's start with the roof line.
Okay, could you clarify exactly what you're asking me now?
All right, so the waiver being requested is roof line offset shall be provided along any roof measuring longer than 75 feet in length in order to provide architectural interest and variety to the mass of the building.
Well, our design has provided gable roofs around the building, providing interest and dimension to the facades.
In fairness, your rear elevation that's shown up here, there's no offset provided in the roof, correct?
Yeah, and I would agree, Mr. Newman. Unfortunately, this building, lends itself to having a view off of Route 33, and it also has the other side of the left side of the building lends itself to a view from Colts Neck Road as you're coming to Route 33. And I think that's what Ms. Newman is concerned about, where you're not meeting our town requirements.
Right, I think the front elevation is very attractive and
That's
does a good
beautiful.
job of meeting our requirements. But the rear elevation you will see when you're driving in the other direction. And I think that could certainly use a bit more finessing to better meet the township's requirements.
Kurt, is that something we can do?
You could definitely do that.
Mr. Chairman, here's my only concern is the applicant is here seeking preliminary and final. So when we're here saying we can do that, we can work with that, I don't know what it looks like. So
Right.
unless they can specify what they're doing or how they're complying, while I'd have no objection if the board wanted to entertain a preliminary, I don't know how we could do a preliminary and final without everybody understanding what these changes are or what the working with is.
Let me ask you this question. Not trying to push the process along, but just a hypothetical. If they mirrored the front facade on the back and mirrored the facade that faces Route 33 on the other side of the building, would that comply?
That would comply with the projections and recesses. I don't know that that would change the roof line. It looks like it may, so it looked like that would make it fully compliant.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. We could easily do that.
And we could do
I
that
think
for the
that
right.
that would definitely, do a lot to make the building look nice in every direction. And I know, I don't know if this board has done it, but I do know the Howell zoning board sometimes, as part of the resolution compliance process, requires the planner to sign off on the architecture, basically. So if the applicant wanted to move forward with the whole application and Laura felt comfortable doing that, we could certainly
Yeah.
review the architectures at that point also.
I don't know if we want to get into the business of that aspect, me personally, but I'll let the rest of the board weigh in. Does anybody think that that's a reasonable response, or would we really want to see what that architecture would look like?
It's reasonable, but I have a question. Are those gables functional or are those just architectural just for show on the front? Would they also be non-functional in the back?
They're strictly non-functional. They're for dimension and except for the reason you're bringing up to give the building interest.
Then I would be okay with that.
And Mr. Chairman, just following up on Christine's point, if the applicant was willing to mirror these facades and the facades were as they were, I would feel comfortable with the board taking that action. It's if they can't comply with that, then I think they'd have to come back to the board.
We have no objection to doing that for both the rear and left side elevations. So the rear would match the front and the left would match the right.
Okay. Councilwoman Evelyn, are you okay with it?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry. Took me a moment to find my mute button. Yes.
Thank you.
Paul Bavai,
Yeah, it's fine.
Paul Dorado,
Yes, I'm okay with it.
Brian Greenfield,
I'm okay with it.
Rob Seaman,
I'm comfortable with it, Mr. Chairman.
Nick Husser.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you have your answer. God bless.
Thank you, Chairman. And then Kurt, there's an additional comment, which is developments with facades over 50 feet in linear length shall incorporate wall projections or recesses at a minimum of 3-foot depths and shall extend over 10% of the facade.
Dante, if I could, I think we just covered that.
Oh, we did that as part of that. Okay, sorry.
Yep, you're basically
Thank you.
mirroring
All right,
the
good.
other.
Let me address this. All right, perfect. I do not believe we have any more testimony from Kurt. Is there any other questions for the architect?
Just Dante, this is Steve Tomblaken, and maybe I missed it, but would that, by mirroring the gables on the roof lines on both of those sides, will that also satisfy the wall projection waiver? So that knocks off the roof line offset and the wall projection waivers in one shot?
I believe so, but I'm going to leave that to Laura to tell us.
Yes.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Any other questions for Kurt?
No, thank you. Next one.
Being none.
Yeah.
I'm going to have our third individual come up and provide testimony. We're going to call our traffic engineer. Joe, are you available? You're on. I can't hear you, Joe. Your mic's not working.
Okay, you want to move on to your planner while Joe figures out another way of calling in? Maybe he's got to use his phone.
Oh, we got him.
Does that work now?
Got him.
My apologies. I don't know what the problem was.
Mr. Fishner, we'd like to swear you in. Please raise your right hand, sir. Mr. Fishner, do you swear from the testimony provided before the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Can you please give us your full name and your business address?
Sure. It's Joseph Fishinger, 651 Old Mount Pleasant Avenue, Livingston, New Jersey. I'm the Director of Traffic Engineering with Brightview Engineering.
Thank you very much.
Joe, could you please provide your qualifications for the board?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Rutgers University, a licensed professional engineer in New Jersey, as well as 6 other states. I'm also a certified professional traffic operations engineer. Roughly 20 years of experience in traffic engineering, and I have been qualified in front of this board in the past. And my
Thank you. We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you. Joe, feel free to take it away.
Okay. So as you heard from the site engineer, the site is a medical office and coffee shop on the southwest corner of Route 33 and Colts Neck Road. Access is via a full movement driveway out to Colts Neck Road and a right-in, right-out driveway onto Route 33. I'll touch base on where we are with the DOT very quickly. We submitted our application and it was deemed complete in August of this year. We're still waiting for comments back from the state. At our pre-application meeting prior to submitting the formal application, the state made it clear that that driveway needed to be a right-in, right-out with a concrete divider island. We're expecting that if whatever comments we get from the state, there may be some minor adjustments to the geometry of the island, but all indication is that that's the access system that the state is agreeable to. As far as the traffic conditions, because of COVID, when we're starting to put together this project, we didn't want to do new counts because we felt they wouldn't be representative. So we utilized counts done from other studies in the area in 2018 and 2019, and then increased them using a background growth rate approved by DOT up to 2021 to get our existing condition volumes, and then again increased it to another 3 years to 2024 to get our future no build volumes. We also added traffic from the other approved developments in the area that hadn't been constructed when those counts were done. The short version is once we run through all of that, the signal at 33 in Colts Neck runs at an overall level service C, and each of the time periods studied, we looked at the traditional weekday morning peak, weekday evening peak, and midday on Saturday. Looking at our site and what it's going to generate, we typically use ITE's trip generation manual to generate traffic. I'm sure you've heard this multiple times. In this case, because we're on a state highway, we also looked at NJDOT's HAPS system, which is their highway access permit rates, and they typically lag behind the ITE rates. And we decided to use the DOT's HAPS rates because they were higher than ITE. So we wanted to be conservative and use their numbers instead of the ITE numbers. To give you an idea, for the medical office portion of the building, the site will generate a total of 49 trips in the morning, 56 in the evening, and 42 on Saturday. And then the coffee shop use would generate 243 trips in the morning, 87 in the weekday evening, and 142 on Saturday. And what we did with this is we assumed no interaction between the two uses. Now, in reality, we would assume that some of the either employees or patrons of the medical office would stop in and get a cup of coffee, something like that. We assume that they're completely different uses, that there would be no interaction or credit in between the two. And we applied that traffic to the adjacent roadway network. We assumed roughly 10% of the traffic's going to come southbound on Colts Neck Road from north of the area. 20% would go northbound on Colts Neck Road to get to the site. And then 35% come each from the east and west sides on Route 33. We're expecting the majority of the traffic for these sites will come from 33, but not all of it. We also did apply what's known as a pass-by rate for the coffee shop section of the development, and that's not, we still utilize the trips. The cars still turn into and out of the site driveways. They're just assumed to be already on the road, that some of the people going to the coffee shop are already on Route 33 on their way to work, on their way to school, pull in, get their cup of coffee and pull back out, go continuing in the same direction they were. So it's not, the traffic was still added to the network. It was just routed a little bit differently. Once we apply the extra trips to the network and rerun our analysis, the driveway, both the driveways on Route 33 and on Colts Neck Road will operate at a level of service C or better on each of the 3 time periods we studied. And at Route 33 and Colts Neck Road, if we just apply our traffic without making any changes, we do have certain movements that go to a level of service F. So we looked at making timing changes and adjustments to the timing at the signal to address that, consistent with NJDOT's requirements. And with those changes, we can get all movements at a D or better, with the overall intersection operating at a level of service C for each of the time periods. And that is consistent with the requirements from NJDOT and what we're allowed to do with signal timings and what the access code will permit. As I mentioned before, we have an application into NJDOT that's been deemed complete. We're waiting for comments from them. And of course, we will have to address any concerns that the state brings up as part of their review. I can go into any more detail if you have specific questions, or go into any of the detailed math, but that's the short overview of the traffic for the site. Essentially, we can mitigate any issues with the traffic flow in the area by making adjustments to the signal timing at 33 in Colts Neck.
Thank you. Ms. Newman.
Yes.
For the most part, the traffic it's a county road, right? This went through county planning board, right? They would have commented. And the traffic on and off Route 33 is really a DOT issue, correct?
That is
And
correct.
And if they don't get their DOT approval, this application doesn't move forward.
That is correct.
So what jurisdiction does the board really have here for traffic and traffic study? Other than accept the testimony and for the public to hear what's happening?
Well, accepting the testimony, and the only thing the board wants to make sure is that the site ingress and egress is safe. As long as you feel as though that's operating safely and can function, that is the limit of our jurisdiction in this particular case.
Okay, and as our engineer, are you qualified to opine on that?
Yeah, I believe as is currently designed, it will function safely and appropriately on both, on the 33 corridor.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
No
Does
problem.
anybody else from the board have any questions or comments? Okay, Counselor?
Thank you. And with our last tonight, we're going to have our planner, Barbara, come up and provide some testimony. Hi,
Ms.
Barbara.
Allen, I'd like to swear you in. Ms. Allen, do you swear from the testimony you provided before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so it's Barbara Allen, E-H-L-E-N.
It's, yes, Barbara Allen. As,
And what is your business address, please?
it's 315 Route 34, Suite 129 in Colts Neck, New Jersey.
Thank you very much.
Barbara, can you please provide your qualifications for the board?
Yes, I am a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey and an AICP. I've worked at Beacon Planning since 2008 and have worked my way up to project manager. I've been accepted by boards throughout New Jersey, Red Bank, Long Branch, Middletown, Carteret, etc.
Thank you. We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you. Barbara, have you had the opportunity to review Ms. Newman's report dated December 8th and Ms. Beam's report of January 19th, 2022?
Yes, I did.
And you've heard the testimony tonight provided by our other professionals?
Yes, I have.
All right, please take it away.
I was hoping that, Mark, that you could put up the exhibit that you had put up regarding the buffers. So as you can see, the subject property is outlined in red, and it is located within the highway development free zone, which does permit healthcare facilities, medical centers, microbreweries, offices, restaurants, retail sales and services, etc. The property is irregularly shaped, as you can see, and it is impacted by 2 roadway frontages. We discussed the project and what it will entail. So I was going to hop over to actually the master plan of the community, which I like to discuss before getting into the variances. The zone did not exist in 1994, but the master plan does include goals and objectives such as protect residential areas from incompatible non-residential development and maintain the township's commercial industrial tax base, which contributes 13% of each tax dollar, and provide an appropriate balance of land uses, which can provide convenient employment opportunities to area residents, reduce traffic loads, and help achieve clean air standards. Although it wasn't in existence, the master plan does note that the majority of commercial uses are located along Route 9 and Route 33. Goals of the 1994 economic plan include focused general commercial and light industrial development to the Route 33 corridor, where there is limited infrastructure available for intense development. The 2017 reexamination included objectives such as to encourage the redevelopment or revitalization of vacant or underutilized properties, promote the protection of neighborhood characteristics by enforcing buffer areas between non-residential and residential, and evaluate the potential for economic and rehabilitation plans in strategic locations within the township where appropriate to encourage sound land use development that can provide economic development opportunities, while at the same time balancing the preservation of neighborhood character as well and the protection of resources. The 2006 reexamination included the goal to provide for desirable non-residential development in appropriate areas of the township to complement the existing character of the community and aid in broadening the local tax base. And finally, in 2019, the master plan land use elements included the goal to encourage new business and industries to locate along the township's highway corridors, which will grow the economy of Howell and provide new services and potential employment opportunities for residents. So what we gain from the master plan and the subsequent reexamination reports is that the community is looking to focus its business along 33, but also wants to respect residential in the area by providing buffers. And as was testified to, the applicant has sought to maintain the required 50-foot buffer along any property that was, or any portion of the property that was proximate to any residential use. So we are honoring the intent of the ordinance in that manner. I also looked to the municipal land use law for special reasons, and I would find that G, to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, recreational, commercial, and industrial uses in open space, both public and private, according to their respective environmental requirements. And to encourage coordination of the various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with a view of lessening the cost of such development into a more efficient use of land. So now that we've gotten through that, we're going to hit the variances. And in this case, they're bulk variances. C1 that is typically viewed as the hardship variance, and C2, which is more of a balance. Mark, if we could go to the buffer exhibit where it shows. So in this instance, the C1, although this is a proposed development, we do note that the property has 2 frontages and is located proximate to residential on 2 other frontages. So in this case, the parcel is being impacted by multiple requirements for buffers and setbacks, which is limiting the developable envelope to a relatively small area. So the applicant has taken the parcel and kind of balanced, how do we develop versus who are we impacting? And as we read through the master plan, we understand that residential is who we want to protect above all. And so that's how they have focused their development. They have pulled it out of where it would be proximate to residential. They've put landscaping in, and they're proposing a 6-foot fence in order to help shield those residential uses. The only intrusion into that area is the parking in the northwest corner. And as was previously testified to, and as was shown on the aerial, that's actually proximate to other retail. So it's not impinging on a residential use as would traditionally you would want to buffer. It's instead kind of mimicking a use that's similar, another retail or commercial use rather than a residential. When we go through the variances, and I'll go through the letter as provided by CME. But that testimony is that's kind of the basis of where I'm going with this. For example, with the fence, yes, we're proposing a 6-foot high fence, but that again is a buffer to a residential use. So it's kind of helping to soften the development and aid in that transition from residential to more commercial. The parking within the buffer, within the 50-foot, as I previously stated, it's a balance on this site because of the constraints that exist. The applicant has chosen to push, yes, the parking more into the buffer so that it can preserve the buffer for the residential uses. Let's see. I believe those were the main variants and that the rest are waivers, if I'm correct.
Great, thank you. That you conclude your testimony?
It can.
Ms. Spiro, did you have something to say? Ms. Newman, do you have anything to add?
No, I think it would be appropriate to just go to Ms. Bell just to confirm.
Yeah, I think Barbara did a good job of, pulling out some of the goals of the master plan and, providing testimony as to how the required variances meet the statutorial criteria for variance relief.
And in your opinion, you believe they've met all that criteria?
Correct. I
Okay,
concur
thank
with Ms. Ellen.
Okay, great. Counselor, or unless
Thank you,
somebody in the board has a question. Seeing none?
Thank you, Chairman. As the board is aware, we've had several individuals provide testimony tonight, and at a prior meeting, we're requesting some variance relief, and we believe that the testimony provided is sufficient for the board to grant what we're looking for tonight, which is preliminary and final site plan with related variance relief and
Thank you.
waivers.
Before we go to the public portion of the meeting, unless the board members have something they'd like to say, could you just summarize all of the things that the applicant has agreed to?
So we're going to address adding a sign on the building. So the address for the property will be on the sign of the building on the, I guess it's the portion that's facing Route 33. We're going to add sidewalks along Route 33. And then there was additional landscaping modifications that we've agreed to work with Shari on to address. And then the last was installing bollards and Mark, what was the
That was the guide rail in front of
the guide rail? That was okay. Yeah, so exactly the guide rail and bollards. So the guide rail will be along the stormwater detention basin, and then the bollards would be where the parking is facing the buildings.
And where appropriate, you would extend this. Councilwoman O'Donnell, is the sidewalk that they're extending far enough, or were they doing an internal sidewalk as well to try to potentially connect to the neighboring property?
I'm satisfied that the applicant is doing as much as they can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from the board before I open it to the public?
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask about clarification on the lighting? I know they wanted a waiver on that because it was above the ordinance requirement. Did they mention hours of operation? I'm just wondering if, yeah.
Sherry, the testimony was that it would be consistent with medical office operations.
Okay, so then I'd imagine that's not going to be a 24-hour operation. So
no, we are not proposing 24-hour operations.
After hours? I'm sorry, what?
And we're not proposing 24-hour operations.
Right. So instead of having lights on dusk to dawn, can we look at dimming them in later night hours?
No objection.
Okay.
Okay, we're adding that to the list. Thank you, Mr. Alfieri. Anything else from our professionals? Okay. Seeing none, we'll open it to the public. Eileen, can you please read the instructions on how to enter the meeting and so forth?
Sure. The chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public. Anyone wishing to ask questions or comment, please use the raise your hand feature. I'll bring you into the meeting one at a time. You will need audio and video. You will need to be sworn in and give your name and address. If you're calling on the telephone, please use *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. And I do have someone with their hand up.
Okay, thank you.
Renee, you're in the meeting. You need audio and video.
Yep, you need to unmute, turn your camera on, please, and please state your name and address. And are you going to be providing testimony? If you're going to be providing testimony, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Am I on?
You're
Yes.
on. You're on now. Were you providing testimony? If so, our attorney has to swear you in.
Yes.
Okay.
Renee, first, can we please get your full name and your street address, your residence address?
Renee Zarelli, 384 Colts Neck Road.
How do you spell Zarelli, please?
Zarelli.
Okay, Mr. Relli, can you please raise your right hand? Mr. Relli, do you swear or affirm that the testimony or any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Okay. So I live directly next door to this property. If you put up the chart, you'll actually see they show my house, the existing building right next door. So I have concerns about the buffer. I know you're putting in a 50-foot buffer. I am not really too happy about the trees you have proposed. I did come into this meeting late because I just got off a flight and I'm in my car right now. So I don't know if you changed but the last meeting that I seen showed more like a shade tree and not, more like a block. I really don't want to see this building. I know I'm going to, but if we could make it as friendly and nice as possible so that everybody's happy, that's something I would want.
I'll let our tree expert respond to you. We did spend quite a bit of testimony on that and adding a bunch of extra plantings for buffers, but I'll let Ms. Spiro respond to that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible you missed it. I did ask them to change the species that they have because the majority of the species are ornamental trees. And they agreed that they would work with me and provide evergreen trees for most of that buffer.
Going down the side where my house is.
Yeah, it would really be that L shape, along your side and then on the back side.
Okay. And did you show like a chart of it, or did I miss that, or what happened there?
They just agreed that they would provide, evergreen buffers, but we didn't get into specifics.
Okay, so are they going to say how many evergreen buffers? Or are they going to add 1, 2, 3, 4? Or we're just going to say, okay, that's good. I'm not.
Pretty much what is depicted. I don't know if you've seen the latest plans because they did add additional trees. Really what we were looking at is just changing the ornamentals into evergreen trees.
Okay, so all the ornamental ones that they showed last time are going to be changed to the evergreens. Is that
right?
What you're saying?
Yeah, so, we'll go over it, when I work with the engineer, but typical evergreen spacing is, roughly 10 foot on center for a tree like a spruce tree. So anything tighter than that, they would crowd each other out.
Okay. Okay, I have some other concerns as well as the buffer. So I don't know if I could ask you, right?
No, go ahead, right? The floor is yours.
So I also didn't catch if they were bringing in water to that property. I'm going to assume they are. They're bringing in water, public water.
Yes.
Hold on.
That's
Let's get the applicant's attorney to either respond or their engineer.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Alfieri.
Okay. Well, so they are bringing in water. I would like, being that my well is on my front lawn, not maybe 10 feet from their line, I would appreciate if we could bring the water also to my property. When Quick Check did their development or subdivision, whatever, they ran the sewer to those 4 properties, mine being one of them, and the Pioneers property being the other. So I'm wondering if I could be added into the well, not the well, the public water, so that I don't have a polluted well from rainwater with, all the parking lots and everything that they're going to be doing. I feel like, that would.
Well, it's a good question. Mr. Alfieri, would the applicant be willing to provide a utility easement to bring the water from Route 33, like you're showing on your plans, over to this property?
I am checking with the client right now. While I'm waiting for a response, Renee, if you have any other questions that we can answer in the meantime.
Yeah, and the other thing was that the location of the dumpsters. Again, I'm right there. I don't know if they could move those dumpsters more towards 33, would be great. But I'll probably be jumping out of bed every time they come in to empty them. The noise would be just horrific.
Mark?
I don't know if they could move that location more towards 33 highway, further from me.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the plan here.
Can you move it over to the angled parking lot area adjacent to the other commercial building? Is there enough over there?
I can move it there. I would lose 2 parking spaces. Which, to be honest, I could put the 2 parking spaces where the dumpster is now, or I could just lose 2 parking spaces and move it back there.
I would prefer 2 parking spaces than the dumpsters, if that would be, I don't know, that's not up to me, but I'm just saying.
Then we can do that. Mark, we can do that?
Yeah, it's totally doable. I would just, swap the 2.
Laura, do you see any negatives to that?
No, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask that they demonstrate adequate circulation, that a garbage truck can actually get there and get out. That would be the only thing that I would request, but currently I don't see a major issue with relocating it.
And Ms. Sherry, that could be properly screened on that side of the site so that's not to be able to be seen from Route 33?
Yeah, I mean, they might have to add some plant material, but they have it on the other side, so really it all should just be moved over with it.
Fair enough. Okay. Renee, anything else?
Is there anything else? The water is really my main concern, those dumpsters, what I just, and the trees blocking some. Yeah, I think that was my main concerns. And also, I did miss earlier, the signs. I heard that they are lit signs. I don't know if where they're located. I missed that part.
They only have one pylon sign. It's on the corner of Route 33 and Colts Neck.
That's fine. Then I don't really have a problem with that. I'm just worried about my well, and if we could do that, that'd be great with me.
You brought up a good point, Mr. Ludwig. Is the you're muted. You know when you unmute.
Okay.
The signage that's proposed over each one of the proposed tenant spaces on the front, will those be lit, or are those just a decorative wood carved type of, because that's what it looked like on your rendering, more of a wood carved type of sign?
My intent on that is that they would be illuminated with decorative fixtures coming out above,
Like
shining onto, I'm sorry?
The gooseneck type?
Yes.
That's the only other signage, Renee.
Would be, yeah, and how bright are those? How bright are we talking?
Mr. Ludwig, can you provide some testimony on that?
I couldn't tell you technically, but they're not going to be a bright focal point. And maybe they could be, it was mentioned earlier that the night lighting could be dimmed down. Perhaps those could be also.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions?
And about the detention basin in the back of there, that's gonna be good with mosquitoes.
Yeah, and just that retention basin, that's right there next to my backyard. I'm worried about mosquitoes and stuff like that going on back, that's so close.
Gonna be full all the time, or is it just one?
Yeah, how much water do they know how much water it would have at all times? Would it only have water at certain times? How does that work?
It's designed to temporarily hold water. It's not designed to always have water. So we had tested the soils below that to ensure that it would not hold water, continuously. It would during a rain event, water from the parking lot would spill in there. And as the water level rises, it would go through a flow control device into the storm sewer next door. And once the water level dropped below the control device, it would infiltrate into the soil.
And that's 50 feet from my property, right? Is that what that is?
Show it up, make sure.
Is that 50 feet from my property? I see the plan very briefly, so I couldn't see exactly how far that is.
Yes, it's located 50 feet from your right property line.
What?
Yeah, that's good.
Is that
Is there any
located,
way?
is that located outside of the appropriate buffer areas?
It is.
It's inside the buffer?
They're saying it's in there in the buffer. So.
It's part of the buffer?
It's not part of the buffer, it's from the buffer, correct?
Yeah, the 50-foot buffer, I have something on the screen right now. I don't know if you can see it.
Okay, now I can see, yep.
So the diagonal lines here are the 50-foot perimeter buffer to a residential use.
Mhm.
So we place that in an area outside the buffer.
Yeah, I really don't see what you're gonna do, but I'm worried about my water, I'm worried about my well.
Well, to clarify,
And I don't have any water issues right now, and I really don't want any either. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Renee, I've confirmed with my clients, we are able to and willing to connect your house to the water line.
Okay, perfect.
So just to clarify, the water main is going to extend down Cold Neck Road, not on 33 as it was shown on the initial plans?
No, I think the plan would be to extend her connection through our property.
And provide a utility easement?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just repaved Colts Neck Road.
I'm just making sure. So I just want to clarify what's going to occur. So you're going to provide a separate water service with a dedicated easement through your property to serve Ms. Sorelli at 384 Colts Neck Road, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Correct.
Anything else, Mr. Rowley?
Nope, that'll do it.
I appreciate your comments. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you, you too.
Okay, anybody
Take care.
else in the audience?
There's anyone else who wishes to ask questions or comment on this application, please use the raise your hand feature.
Okay, we'll give them about a minute.
I don't have anyone raising their hand.
Okay, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Counselor, you want to summarize one more time, I guess, everything you have agreed to?
I'll
Got longer.
Yeah, I'll go through the conditions one more time. If the board is inclined to give the approval. We're going to add the address to the sign on the building. We are going to add sidewalks along Route 33. We're going to work with Sherry to provide sufficient landscape buffering. We're going to install bollards along the parking in front of the property, and then a rail in front of the detention basin. We're going to also provide a dimming effect on the lights after hours. And then we are going to connect to the neighboring property a water line and provide a easement for same.
Thank you.
We're moving the trash.
And moving the trash and swapping.
Oh, yes, you're right. Sorry about
Swapping,
that.
swapping 2 parking spots.
Correct. Thank you.
And increasing the evergreen plantings as
Yes.
opposed to the ornamentals.
Yeah, that's the landscaping, working with Shari.
Thank you.
The only other thing I could think of is mirroring the architecture for the facades front and side.
Thank you, guys. That's why you guys take notes.
Okay, Mr. Alfieri, does that conclude your testimony?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. If anybody has any questions from the board, happy to entertain them. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I have one last question. Yeah, I'm curious. This might just be maybe I need to know the ordinance. So the sign facing 33 is not advertising for the strip. It's actually direct to a tenant, correct?
It would have the names of whatever tenants are in the building. So let's say someone wants the whole building, they get the whole sign.
Okay, understood. I think my question is maybe for the professional might know if they move in, let's say a few months later, they go out of business. Is there maybe an ordinance with the tenant or how does that sign come down or get changed? Or what I'm trying to say is we shouldn't have that up there if something happens or a business goes out of business.
They're entitled to keep a sign, even if a business went out of business, because the future owner may want to use the sign. And as long as there's no deviation in the code, they would be entitled to utilize that sign. So I don't believe that pylon requires any specific relief. I think it is permitted, but we have no ordinance requirement which states that if a building is vacant, the sign needs to be removed. They would
I
be.
think Mr. Cristiano was asking about that extra sign they were looking for on the side of the building.
The one actually facing 33 that's up on the top of the gable, correct?
Right. So the one that's not the one that required variance relief. And then this
I
councilwoman.
thought he was talking about the pylon sign.
No, this is the building
No.
facade sign.
This is the facade sign, okay. And I would defer to the applicant, but I think if they were granted the approval, they'd be entitled to maintain that signage. And again, we don't have an ordinance which would require removal upon a vacancy.
Mr. Cristiano, question for you. Are you concerned that if it said, I'm just Joe's medical office and Joe's medical office is vacated, your problem is that the sign would continue to say Joe's medical office even though that tenant is gone?
Yes,
so is it just a concern that you would want that sign covered temporarily until they could reface it with some new tenant? Is that the issue, really? You're muted, Mr. Cristiano, you're muted.
Can't hear you, Joe.
Wasn't so much an issue, just a concern. I just maybe wanted to know if there was an ordinance on that.
Well, Mr. Cristiano, they're not, it's a variance, so if you feel it's necessary for them to cover over the tenant as it moves out.
I don't feel it's necessary. I really just want to know if there.
And just for clarification, it will just be one tenant on that sign, either the tenant that's on that that takes that corner of the building, or if they take the whole building, it will be the sign for the whole building.
Okay.
I'm asking the applicant.
With the street address.
With the street address. Okay, we're in green. Anything else?
I don't think it needs a variance though. So someone mentioned that the sign needed a variance. I don't think it does.
That one.
Ms. Newman?
So again, as the applicant had initially testified, I think they revised their facade signage plan to be compliant with the ordinance so that they have the one pylon and the one wall sign.
Oh, okay, so it's not a variance relief they need for that sign.
Mark, can you just clarify? It's 2 signs, 1 pylon, 1 facade?
Yeah, the facade, we're permitted to do 25%.
That's correct. And I think you technically are allowed 2 facades because you have a corner property.
Got it.
Yeah, then we have
Thank
the freestanding, obviously.
Yes.
Okay. I will entertain a motion for preliminary or preliminary and final.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. Can we do preliminary and final, although we are still pending information from the DOT or from the state?
So, Councilwoman, yes, we can. In all of our resolutions, they're conditioned upon any and all outside agency approvals. So it is appropriate to act on final with that outstanding.
I'm clear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is that a motion?
It's about to be, yes.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion for preliminary and final.
I'll second it.
SP 1037, with all the conditions set forth by the applicant and request from this board.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Second.
I will second it.
Thank you, Paul. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Councilwoman O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. We appreciate your approval tonight and your time.
Have a good night.
Have a great night, everybody.
Okay, since we don't need to go to executive session, Paul, you want to give us a quick report on master plan?
Well, right now, like I said, we had put out the, asking the neighbors if there are other roads besides the roads that we had picked. I know a couple extra ones came out, and from what I understand right now, we're at that traffic count point. So
Okay.
I believe
Oh,
Jen,
I can give a little bit of an update on there from Jen. if
yeah,
you'd
she probably
like.
says it better, so.
She said the land use element draft is basically done. The circulation element counters have been ordered and will be put down within the next couple of weeks. And after the counts are taken, we'll need a couple of weeks to complete the draft. So both should be ready to go to public hearing the end of February, beginning of March.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thank you. There's nothing else to discuss. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
All in favor?
Aye. Night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Don't forget our special meeting, January 31st.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
I'll send the links tomorrow. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.